Good evening, everyone. All right, so this is tonight's meeting of the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. I lost the agenda here, which was behind me, so I need to get back to it so I can read it. All right. In accordance with today is Monday, October the 16th, 2023. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Lunenburg Public Access YouTube channel within 24 hours. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at this meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Public participation is encouraged, and public comments may be welcomed during committee member discussions at the discretion of the chair. And so tonight we're going to call the select board meeting to order, seeing that we have Mr. Tom Gray here, we have Greg Roy, we have David Blatt, and we have Matt Allison. And then I will also pause so that way Carol can call her meeting to order.
Most certainly, I will call this meeting of the school committee to order. In attendance, we have myself, Laura Brzezowski, and Peter Beardmore. So there is a quorum.
Excellent. So Laura, I haven't had the chance to formally welcome you to the school committee. I know you've been on there for a little bit and we've had the chance to see each other around town. So welcome as a member of the school committee. I'm really excited for you to be here with us, as all members of the school committee as well. We're excited to see you guys tonight and talk with you. So let's just jump straight into it. So the reason why we've asked you to come meet with us, and I think that speaking with Dr. Burnham and also me speaking with Carol, I know there was also interest on the school side to come meet with us as well. So bottom line is we've talked about this plan for municipal building design, and the approach that we took with this, the approach that we took with this is coming up with phases on how we're going to go about approaching these buildings. So we're looking at Ritter Building, we're looking at Town Hall. Current thought process is for phase one to be the renovation of Ritter Building. That would become the new permanent home for the school superintendent offices, as well as the ACE program. And then that would also be the building of a new annex or, new kind of town hall offices. During this time, we would displace the members of the staff who currently work at the Ritter Building. They would be displaced and would need to be in the TC Passios for temporary housing during the construction process. At the end of phase one, everyone moves from Ritter that was there previously, moves back into the new town admin offices. School admin get to leave the TC Passios building, and everyone from town hall gets consolidated as well into this new Ritter town hall complex. And then we start phase two. And phase two is the renovation of town hall. And this is turning this into a meeting space, going back to the original kind of New England roots of a meeting house. And so this would look like on the first floor, 3 meeting rooms, and on the second floor, 1 large meeting room, which is the current room that we meet in. We were looking at modifications of getting rid of the expansion for the town manager's office, which is in the back of the room, and the HR office. That way that room becomes a little bit bigger, some engineering work. But bottom line is that resolves then phase two. Phase three then, so now at this point, we end phase two and we have the consolidation of town and school offices into one kind of building complex. We have committed community space and meeting space in the old town hall. We take our 2 historic buildings, continue their use, and then we turn our attention to TC Passios. And this is where I think we envision some overlap. TC Passios The current plan is to turn that into somewhat of a community center, to have space for the Boys and Girls Club, continue the use, excuse me, I didn't mean to say Boys and Girls Club, have space for the before school and after school programs. This would, and this is all kind of temporary again. So I think I'm speaking a little bit out of turn here because I'm not looking at my notes. Long-term disposition of TC Passios would be food pantry, would be community kitchen area, would be storage for the town clerk for all those related products. It would be PAC Studio. And it would be some remaining offices, I think, for facilities or something along those lines. The after school, before school program would need to come back into the schools. And there would not be expansion potential for the Boys and Girls Club. So based on what we understand about buildings and the different phases that you go through, our approach would be to renovate, to keep the entire building standing, renovate the front portion of it, so that way we don't get triggered by these code upgrades to the whole thing. Once we finish those renovations in the front portion of the building, we tear the rest of the building down. And that would be the entire north wing, that would be the central wing. And then part of that discussion was what to do in that remaining space. We've talked about adding bathrooms, public bathrooms on the back end of that building, so that way the parents, others who come to sporting events. We've talked about a parking lot. We've also talked about potential for an athletic field in that space, but we haven't shored up phase 3. Now, Turkey Hill is a much more attractive building for many reasons. It can accommodate because of its younger life. It can better accommodate the Boys and Girls Club expansion. It can better accommodate the before school, after school program. It can meet the need of the community kitchen, and in fact, better because there's already newer kitchen equipment in the building. And you guys have a pretty decent boiler system as well in there. It also provides that community gym that we would need to maintain for the community and for the seniors. So there's some overlap there potential on phase 3. So I want to stop talking, give anyone on the Municipal Building Design Committee the opportunity to correct anything I've said first. Okay.
I'd just like to say for the record that you opened the Municipal Building Design Committee's meeting tonight, not the select board. But
Correct. Just say select board. Clearly, I'm used to doing that meeting, right?
Does that mean we all got promoted?
no, it's a promotion.
I was going to say we all got demoted. I mean,
Yeah,
we're volunteers only.
Yeah, that's probably better. I don't have anything to add.
All right, so thank you. And any corrections to any of that? No. All right, so if I can just turn to the school committee Chairman Archambault, it's just we can start talking through some of this overlap and what you guys see as Turkey Hill expansion or renovation or future needs.
Well, obviously, we know the limitations of that building. And the first part that I'm going to correct you on, don't plan on that furnace. That is a disaster waiting to happen. We've held it off so far. But saying that the furnace is fairly decent, I'm not quite sure that I would agree with that. We have talked about what do we think the use for this building would be after its useful life as a school building is done. And our discussion, though we have not voted on this, we feel that we would be putting the cart before the horse. But our discussion in this area has also pointed towards a community building, though there have been some talk about field space as well. Though perhaps if the field space could be accomplished near TCP, maybe that wouldn't be as big of a need. As far as when you came to us about a year ago and said you need to keep this building up, and that's what's in our capital plan that you will see as it comes out, that in keeping this building up, we trigger everything. There's not a lot that can be done before the ADA stuff gets triggered. But there are some things, but the thing you need to know is municipal building funds from the school, the municipal school, mass school building fund. There we go. The reimbursement stuff from the state can only happen if the building remains a school for 10 years. So for example, if we were to place the windows, which desperately need replacing, we could put a bid into the municipal, I did it again, to MS, I'm going to say, thank you. Anyways, to the building authority in the state, we can put a request in. Should they help us with those windows, that has to remain a school for 10 years. And any other project would be added on. So suppose we did a roof with their help and a few extra years. Well, now we've bounced that 10 years out more. So in looking at the whole project, everything going on in town, that if we want to use Turkey Hill as a community center, I think we agree it would be decent space to do that. It's not a good elementary school. It wasn't assigned to be an elementary school, but it would be good community space. But in order to do that, obviously, we have to have a new school. And we haven't gone there because I promised you we would not go there until we see where you're going in this committee. So we haven't done any major discussion about a new school, waiting to see what this committee comes up with. Though I agree, the two things are intertwined. Is there anyone on my committee that might like to make a comment?
Oh, I'm calling for Mr. Beardmore here because as him being a former member of this committee, I know that he has some unique insight into some of this plan.
So I thank you, both Mr. Jeffries and Mrs. Archambault. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
This is a problem that is at the intersection of budget, time, and risk. The risk, from my perspective, is that we have a major system go down at Turkey Hill, and we can't run that building. And that becomes a bigger problem than any problem that any other board in Lunenburg has tried to solve in the last year. And that's saying something. That's the risk. The problem associated with that risk is that it needs to be balanced against other budget priorities, which many of you folks in the Municipal Building Committee have been wrestling with for 2 years now, plus if you consider your previous mandate. And so the question is how do we make it all work within a limited amount of excludable debt that keeps us under the caps that are outlined in our financial policies, our fiscal policies, and within the limitations of what we can fund from a capital planning perspective. And so when Mr. Jeffries met with the school committee nearly a year ago, as Mrs. Archambault outlined, he challenged us to think in terms of what we can do to maintain Turkey Hill as a school for the next 10 to 15 years. And with that in mind, we have operated and done a considerable amount of research over the course of the last year, looking at 2040 as a horizon for that building. What that means is a minimum of $14 million inside of the next several years to cover everything running from roof to windows to HVAC to electric to plumbing to ADA. And I say minimum because there's been a number of different ways of looking at this with and without MSBA funding, and I don't want to get into the weeds of what could or could not be inside of it. Suffice to say, it's an awful lot of money. And if you're going to spend arguably half of what you would spend on the replacement value of the building, then maybe it ought to live past that 15-year time horizon and be useful for other purposes. And so that is kind of where, okay, if we want to articulate a plan that we go out and get money, get MSBA commitments, come back to the town and say, we're either going to do this through a capital planning project or multiple capital planning projects or an excludable debt question or something along those lines. Here's the vision for this building. And the problem is exactly what was articulated earlier, which I don't know how big a problem it is given that time horizon of 2040. But the reality is that I don't know that we want 2 community kitchens and 2 extra gyms and 2 of everything else that was just described for TCP. So that, you know, I think that is the problem, and you know, perhaps it's the phase 3 timeline, you know, there has to be some sort of financial modeling associated with that to say that whatever is done with TCP, we do it on the level knowing that by 2040 that building comes down. I don't know exactly what, but if we're going down the path of Turkey Hill being a community center, at some point that it's not usable as a school, or we don't want to use it as a school anymore, I think that we need to figure that out before we go to the town in the spring or whenever your articles are gonna come forward. The other thing that I do want to mention is the extra activities that the school department offers in TCP relative to before and after school activities are largely delivered by the school because we serve that constituency, parents and students. But that is not the mission of the schools. It is a community service for the entire community, just like pickleball, just like a community kitchen, just like all of the other services that you folks have gone and prioritized or deprioritized. And the other services that we offer in our other buildings that are going to be compromised by this decision, such as adult basketball, adult volleyball, youth basketball, are also community services that the school offers. And some of them are not going to be delivered when this plan comes to fruition. And I can assure you that that responsibility as a community service will need to be communicated that way. Because I've done everything that I can to communicate that we can't continue to deliver all these things in less space at the same time. But nobody wants to, so far as I'm aware, consider looking at or exploring or funding alternatives as part of these plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beardmore. Yes, Laura.
All right, is this working? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So part of my concerns is just the shuffling around as far as with phase 3. So we're gonna just the shuffling. We're gonna move community services into Passios after redoing Passios, and then maybe Turkey Hill. I'm kind of confused about the timeline there, and pouring money again into Passios if we're planning on abandoning Passios down the line.
Well, so to clarify that, Laura, we weren't planning on abandoning Passios. And I think that through this conversation, or prior to today, that there seems to be some overlap with our phase 3 plan and the disposition of Turkey Hill. And so I think that what I'm hearing, and I don't want to, summarize too much here, but what I'm hearing is it may make sense for us to, as phase 3, use the investment at Turkey Hill and keep TC Passios largely the same. So that way we can hobble along 10 more years to get to where we need to be at. Let me step back from that. If you guys were to take some money for windows, right? And this is the benefit of the schools doing this. Those windows don't have a 10-year lifespan. They have a 20 or 30-year lifespan. And so, if you can, or greater, I'm sure the windows that are in the building, I'm sure are 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah.
And so the benefit is that if there's a way to rehabilitate Turkey Hill, prime that building to be a future community center, and reduce the overall cost of the town in that process, that if for 10 years we need to hobble along with Turkey Hill, with TC Passios, that we can find a way to reduce the cost of TC Passios to do that. And then that puts us in a great position in 10 years to be able to step into Turkey Hill as this community center we've envisioned for TC Passios, and to have that at Turkey Hill instead, and then look at that TC Passios land as a future athletic field or something else. Right now, the plan that we have calls for future use of TC Passios. And why we wanted to have this meeting was to say, does that overlap? And it sounds like it does, with disposition of Turkey Hill.
Okay, all right. Do you have timing as far as for phases, as far as how many years we're talking roughly? I know you can't predict the future, but as far as phase 1 and phase 2, roughly how many years you're hoping?
I'll turn to Mr. Roy. I roughly recall about 4 years, but I'll turn to Mr. Roy if he remembers the answer to this.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair, for putting me right on the spot. No, good question. I think one of the things that we liked about this plan was that we would have the ability to pivot a time. Like, we do intend to put a timetable in front of the town. Like, we think that phase 1 could be done in this time window, starting roughly here, finishing roughly here. We think the implications will be roughly this. And then same thing with phase 2, same thing with phase 3. The thing we liked about this plan is that, particularly when it got to phase 3, if we embark on this phased plan and it's a 5, 6, 7 year time, I realize I'm political about the way I'm answering your question, but if it's a 5 or 6 or 7 year time before we get to phase 3, and by that point in time, by necessity or because we've decided that we need to now prioritize something on the school side of things with Turkey Hill, and things have to switch, it's an adaptable plan, because we can, at that point, even if we had done phases 1 and phases 2, phase 3 can kind of sit out on its own. There's different things we can do. There's a couple of different ways we can go with it. So I think we're all, I think we're in the 4 to 5 year window with phases 1 and 2, because I think by the time we get a project for phase 1, it's going to be a year from now. It's going to be a year's construction window there. And then I think we are envisioning finishing phase 1 before we go on to the next phase, so that we can stagger the cost implications to the town. That's another benefit to this plan that we see. And I think that we'd have the same time horizon. Maybe there'd be some overlap with soft costs and design on phase 2 at the tail end of the construction of phase 1. But I think we're talking a 4 to 5 year time window on those. So by the time we get around to phase 3, we're really talking about something in the 4 to 5 year time frame. Other people can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my thoughts on it.
I gotta be
I-
honest, that's way faster than I thought.
And I could be optimistic. There's obviously there's a lot of things that have to fall into place for that to happen. With funding articles at town meeting, and there's all kinds of different overlays that work that work over that with, politically speaking. So, but I think it'll be at least that, I would think, even if we sort of fast tracked it.
Carol.
Michael Ray, can I ask Carol a question?
Of course.
Carol, ideally, looking at what you have at Turkey Hill, you have 3 education centers: primary school, Turkey Hill, and the middle high school complex, middle school high school complex. What would you, if we weren't in business, if town hall had been resolved, 3 years ago, or if it's going to be resolved in 4 years, as I think Greg's time frame is pretty accurate, 4 to 5 years, providing we get buy-in. So what would your ideal situation be for Turkey Hill? I mean, that's your probably your problem child of the 3 education centers that the board has. And, what would be the ideal situation for you? Would you be planning a new school right now, or a dramatically improved Turkey Hill? And if so, what steps would the school board be taking?
Well, the school board hasn't made that decision yet, because as I alluded to, I had promised Mr. Jeffries we would wait. But if you're asking me, and what I believe is what most people feel, is that we need a new building. That building was made to be a middle school. And even if you redo all the electrical systems and you do everything you need to do, from the HVAC, that when something breaks, you have to go to eBay because the parts aren't made anymore, to all the other systems, the windows and everything else, even if you redo everything, it's still a middle school. It's not a vibrant place for young learners. And unless you are an educator or a parent who's very involved in school, you probably don't understand that. But as a former educator of very young children, I would not have wanted to teach 3rd graders at Turkey Hill. It's just not the right kind of space. Not to mention, at the moment, they only have 2 plugs in each classroom. You can well imagine, even just something as simple as that, how difficult it is to do that. So my belief, though we have not voted on it, we have alluded to it, but have not voted on it, is that we would, if money came from heaven, we would have a new building there. But we understand that we are part of the team here. That we need to work with the town. And I've lived in town for 34 years. I know how we kick things down the road and everything keeps going. We'll just wait. We don't fix anything. We just wait. And now all these buildings are falling apart. So we have to fix them. And we understand that. And so we're waiting to see what happens.
So, I wasn't so much interested in knowing, what you need, but when you need it. What you've described is something that, needs to be fixed before 4 years is up. And then, of course, the complication is that if you use the state school money, then that if you're fixing versus building new, that means that if you're fixing, that means you immediately tag a 10-year life onto the fixed product.
Absolutely. And that was the comment I was going to make, is that don't forget that you have to keep it a school for 10 years after the last use of MSBA money. And the other point that I wanted to make with that is, before you can apply for this money, you need to have the funding. You need to have the other half. So we can tomorrow say, to the MSBA because they've just started their repair again. They won't repair everything, but they will do windows. So we could say to them tomorrow, we'd like to have the money for our windows, but they're not going to give it to us because we don't have the other half.
No,
So-
based on the, if I can just ask a question to follow from Mr. Scalabrini, based on the kind of projected capital plan, my understanding was that you guys were looking at 2030-ish as the kind of scheduled replacement or upgrade. Is that correct?
Just a
The mi-
placeholder, Michael Ray.
It's
Okay.
a placeholder.
It's merely a placeholder because we need to have it on there and, you know, it's all kind of pending what comes out of activities like this. So, you know, which is the risk of putting it on the capital plan is exactly what was just evidenced, which is there is no time or date that says we have to do this $14 million worth of stuff in 2030. It needs to be someplace and it's not going to be next year.
Yeah.
And, you know, and given that we have to prioritize in particular the next 5 years worth of stuff, and we don't have a clue what all the other moving parts are, it needs to be someplace, and that's where we put it. But I just want to add one more thing that probably ought to be considered for context here, relative to Mr. Scalabrini question. There have been conversations about renovate or replace in a vacuum. And one of the effects that a renovate is going to have is going to be the disruption on the building. And the school department actually has done a pretty good job at maintaining that building over the years. There's been a lot of asbestos mitigation in that building, and the heating, the main boiler was replaced at one point. If you go into that room, one of the reasons why people believe that it's brand new is because the room is meticulously maintained. But the boiler itself has got some age to it, as does the distribution system for the heating, and the blowers that are in the classroom all date back to the original building in 1968 or 69, I believe. So there are some pretty old, and it being 2023, imagine trying to operate a classroom in 2023 with 4 outlets. And by the way, we are exceeding, I would speculate, probably exceeding the recommended load on any one of those outlets in any one of those classrooms because of the extension cords and, you know, all that stuff that comes into play. But what I was getting to is the disruption on the building. So we did the asbestos mitigation without needing to close the school. We built an elevator without having to close the school. Harder to do when you're doing a full-scale change to the HVAC distribution system, or the electrical, or the water, or any of the other systems that extend out into the classrooms themselves. And in all likelihood, a major renovation, or the class of renovation that we're talking about, is probably going to also include a year plus of portable classrooms, and a major disruption to the education of those students when all of that takes place.
Mr. Blatt?
So I have a couple of questions. There's, I see a few of us that are still long-standing members of the building reuse, back to when you called it something else before that. One of the comments that we had when we went through the original process is that the school committee mentioned that there's certain offices that have to be with the after school and ACE. So I'd like the school committee to be able to furnish a new list of what offices are possible if we were going to do a renovation to Ritter, what offices are possible on that? Because it won't be all of them, because we just heard that we know there won't be all of them right now that we thought at first. So that will knock down square footage. That was one question. The other one is that I'm listening closely, and I'm hearing from the school committee that they don't envision Turkey Hill as being a school for that purpose. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is that in any way, shape, or form, do they believe a renovation to Turkey Hill will make it a school conducive for the purpose of the age group it's intended for right now? I think this is critical to us to know, because, you know, you're going to sit here and we're going to talk about having to keep a building for 15 years as a school that you don't believe functions properly as a school it's intended for. And in the end, personally, we all looked, the building reuse committee, the TC Passios committee would be drooling over a Turkey Hill over anything else in this town. And I hate to be so blunt about it, but I feel like all the work that has gone on for 2 years, the comment of saying that the school committee is going to wait for us is completely backwards. Because the fact is that the whole plan would have been simpler if we knew that Turkey Hill will never be the school, is never going to be the school that you guys want. And that's the whole thing we need to understand. Can we renovate Turkey Hill to make the school you want? And that's the simplest question I can ask. So I'll get off the soapbox.
Can I take a shot at that answer?
You can.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I think it can, Dave, but I think that it will not be financially viable to do it that way.
So guys, what are we sitting here now? You're telling us that you don't want that building. You're basically saying you don't want that building twice, 3 times, right? What are we sitting here? If this is once again the cart before the horse.
Well,
You
wait,
guys need a building. You need a building that services the age group. We're killing ourselves. We've wasted dollars on this thing.
With
Time
all
on this
due
thing.
respect,
I'm sorry. As a 4-year member of this committee, I'm livid right now because
with all due respect, this has not been a secret, Mr. Blatt. This has been discussed publicly in school committee meetings for my entire membership on the school committee, and the year before that when I was on the finance committee, and it was discussed in this committee when I was a member of this committee. So with all due respect, this is not new information, okay? This was relayed to Mr. Jeffries when he visited our committee last year and was relayed back to you in a subsequent meeting. So with all due respect, this information is not new. Everything that I've just shared with you, everything that Mrs. Archambault has just shared with you is not new information, okay?
If I can
We have
call.
been asked,
Oh,
we
let
have
me
been
finish
asked, given the context and the circumstances, to wait in line. And that's exactly what we have done. And all along the way, Mrs. Archambault has articulated that we will wait in line so long as the line continues to move. And that has been repeated time and time and time again over the course of the last few years.
I guess the biggest problem I'm having right now, I'm sorry, Christina, let me get you 1 minute. The biggest thing I'm having right now is one of the things that as a committee, when we first started, we felt we failed miserably, is that we were going to talk about vacating buildings again and with no plan for those buildings. And what you guys are talking about right now is vacating a building with no plan for that building. Or are you talking about tearing it down completely and building a new school on that spot? That's
No,
what we need to know.
Didn't say
Mr.
that.
Blatt, Mr. Blatt, I
Completely
want to correct that.
misrepresenting what's been said here.
No,
Mr. Blatt.
that's not, I want to correct that. They haven't said that they're looking to tear down the building, and this is why we're
That's
having.
not, I'm not saying that, Michael, right? I'm saying that the idea is if you build something new, you're vacating a building, correct or not correct?
You are absolutely correct on that.
Thank you very
That's why
much.
we're having
Then
the
I don't want to
conversation.
I don't want to spend $1 million in this town, go to a town meeting and spend $1 million to tear down a building that was neglected because there's no other purpose for that building. You know, or do we spend $1 million a year maintaining this building with no purpose in it? This committee had a charter, and the charter is to make sure we have buildings and we have a use for these buildings when we propose something. And once again, we're talking about not doing that. And I have a tough time as a citizen standing up in town meeting and saying, hey guys, let's vote for this. But by the way, you're gonna have to, we're gonna be leaving another hole in this town of a building in 5 years.
Mr. Blatt, I do think, and I want to call on Christina, but I think that the way, and maybe we need to be more clear in how this is coming across. But to reiterate, what the school committee has been working on is if they're going to, it's figuring out the future disposition of Turkey Hill in the sense of, will it be a future school? And if not, then what will it be? And that's why we're having this conversation today, because that the best likely disposition of that building is what we have planned for TC Passios. And that seems to be the preface of the conversation today. I will come back to that. Let me call on Christina. Christina?
Sorry, I was just going to ask about TCP because I know a lot of our plans was using TCP in various ways, but if they're talking about rebuilding a school, then it comes back to where it would be built. Are they going to leave people in that school while it's rebuilt and that would be TCP, or are they going to need TCP to rebuild? Because that changes, I think, the discussions of what we planned of, are we just going to need a roof on TCP and do we need to consider that? And I didn't want us to go down the rat hole of this becomes a school committee meeting where we talk about buildings that are outside of our scope. And I don't want to get lost in that. As much as I care about it, because I have 3 little ones, I'll be in it very soon. I don't want to lose focus of what we're discussing today.
All right, I want to offer a compromise here, but Mr. Gray.
Well, just my 2 cents on this is that it seems pretty clear that the school committee does not see Turkey Hill as a long-term viable school in the financial situation. I mean, you could, as Peter had mentioned, you can put a lot of money into it, but it wouldn't be, it's not viable. So with that in mind, if that is correct, then to me, the answer is that we need to, phase 3 should probably be building a new school. Now, wherever that is and however that is done, rather than putting the money into Turkey Hill for 10 or 15 years, the money is better spent building a brand new school. Now, what does that mean with Turkey Hill afterwards? I don't know. My biggest fear is that it becomes another TCP where we basically don't have the money to maintain it and it slowly decays to where TCP is now. So my big, I think the first thing would be is build a new school, after phase 2, and then we need to figure out what happens to Turkey Hill. Is it torn down? Is it, does the town have the money to put money into it, to turn it into a community center? Do we tear down TCP if that's the case, because we don't need it? Those are all questions that I have that I don't have an answer for, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Mr. Roy.
Thanks. Couple preface comments first before I say what I want to say. First of all, I think this forum is where we need to be. We need to be. I really appreciate that the school committee is here tonight and that we're talking about this collectively. I think that it's really important. Secondly, I also just wanted to say that I think that personally, this is one member of the whatever we call ourselves now, the Municipal Building Design Committee. Really appreciated that you've looked to our board for before you've stepped in thus far with your plans for Turkey Hill. I mean, I caught that loud and clear. I wanted to say those 2 things in preface to my next comment, though, and that is to say, I really think that we need to look at this ecumenically. If I think we need to hold hands on this issue.
Mhm.
Biggest buildings that we have in town, the most expensive, elaborate buildings that we have in town are the school buildings. They drive the major portions of what we borrow in this town. We borrowed, I mean, I was on the committee that built the new middle high school. So, I mean, I know what goes into these type of projects, and they're huge, they're enormous, likely to be double or triple the cost of what we're putting into the Ritter and what we're putting into the town hall, and probably what we would do if we renovated and built and renovated for a community center. So I think that that we ought to think critically about how we move forward. So I'm in the spirit of what Tom just said, where whatever we do, I think we need to hold hands on this issue. I think it needs to be we need to, and I'm not pointing fingers, okay, but we need to stop doing this and us pointing at them and them pointing at us. And well, we need to get together as the town at large, all the groups in the town, and just start putting these projects on the board and figuring out how we all are going to get it done. You know, I understand that the school is under the purview of the school committee and that the other buildings are under the purview of you know, our board, but the bottom line is it all comes from the same checkbook, right? The taxpayer's checkbook. So I really feel like we're at a point now, and that's why I think this discussion is so valuable. I think we're at a point where we need to strategize on Turkey Hill, and we need to have that as part of the whole picture, because I think if we go to the town meeting with a strategy for doing the municipal building, Ritter, and then the town hall, it's going to be a much stronger argument if we've put the time in to work with your committee and vet how it's going to fit into the big picture of the big ticket item that everybody knows is coming, right? It's either a major renovation of Turkey Hill, or what we're hearing tonight more likely is a complete rebuild of Turkey Hill. So I just think that we need to start thinking that way as a town, as our committee and the school committee and whatever other committees we need to be on board with that, and put together a financial roadmap and a plan that gets us there. I will say that I think that the spirit of our thoughts in our committee and our plans for phasing, at least in my opinion, were to give a nod to that fact, right? So like we're trying to put our phasing together that would anticipate the need for a big capital outlay on the school side of things, on the school facility side of things, and would therefore our phase 3 becomes, you know, sort of we can move, you know, if in 5 years the town, we put something in place here and the town needs to pivot from that, we can do that. And I think that was, you know, sort of an advantage of it. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll stop. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to speak for a second, then I'm going to call on Laura and then Mr. Beardmore. So what I want to try to get us to look at is what does the town look like in 2038? Okay, so this is 15 years from now. In 15 years from now, you know, we have to do something before then with town hall, right? The building has structural concerns. We have, you know, we've outlined previously a host of concerns with the building. If we want to continue the use of the building, we have to invest in it. You know, we need to invest in the Ritter building. We know that we have some known issues there. They're not as significant as the other buildings, but if we want to turn that building properly into offices and specifically school offices, you know, we have to change the HVAC system. We have to put walls all the way to the ceiling. There's a bit of stuff that needs to happen. So 2038, we have a renovated Ritter, we have a renovated town hall, we have a new town hall, and we have some form of a Turkey Hill. We also have some form of TC Passios or community center, right? So this is the image. And I think what we're trying to figure out is what is the best way to get there. When we look back on, you know, and I'm not pointing fingers as I say this, this is just the reality of what occurred. When we left the primary school, it needed a new roof. It needed new electrical work. It needed new plumbing work. It needed all those things when we left the building. So when the new school got built and then it came over to the town, there was a need on the old primary school to spend a lot of capital to be able to turn that building into something else. Same thing with TC Passios. When we left the TC Passios, it needed a new roof. It needed plumbing work. It needed electrical work. And so it needed a lot of money in order to get that building to be used for something else. So what we're trying to, the conversation that I had with the school committee early in the year is, or last year now, is if you turn over Turkey Hill to the town and you don't want to reuse the building, if the vision is a new school, the building needs to be in a much better position for the town to be able to convert it to a future use. And so part of, I think, what is being strategized here today is if ultimately that building needs $15 million of renovations and that 15 million is going to carry us for another 40 or 50 years for not necessarily school, but windows, ADA, critical building systems. If 14, 15 million gets us 30, 40 years out of that building, currently with it sitting with the schools, we can get a certain percentage of that reimbursed or paid for. Once it leaves school hands, we're not eligible for those funds. And so I think the question is, on the Turkey Hill component, and here's how I think the solution of this may be. I think the solution is continue with phase 1, continue with phase 2. We resolve the primary problem of the town, which is acceptable offices for town offices, acceptable offices for school offices, and reasonable meeting space for the community. Those get resolved in phase 1 and phase 2. We also have to be mindful of capital capacity. How much debt can we take on at once? If as part of phase 1 and phase 2, we also have funding in for this phase 3 being TC Passios school renovation. If as a package deal, we do 1, 2, and Turkey Hill renovation, we will find ourselves in 10 years from now in a position at which we no longer need to resolve any more building issues for the most part, and we can tear down TC Passios, we can take over Turkey Hill, and we can build a new school. And we fully resolve, and when we take over Turkey Hill, it won't be in a position where it needs $15 million of immediate renovation coming right after a brand new school being built. So I think that I fully understand that there are, while the school was not ideally designed for elementary, it was designed for children. And so there is a large child use. And when you look at the before school, after school program, you look at the Boys and Girls Club, you're in the age range that can make use of the Turkey Hill building for longevity. And so as we're here in this point in the conversation, what I see as a good phase 3 is that we bring in the Turkey Hill's $14 million project into this full picture, and that we move forward with phase 1, phase 2, Turkey Hill. And then we start ticking down the clock. Laura.
Carol's hand is raised, so I'm gonna defer to her because she's my chair. You sure? You
That's
sure?
right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I appreciate Mr. Blett's forthrightness, because that's very useful. Because I feel like we're all just dancing around things a little bit. We haven't really talked about it as a committee because we have been waiting to see what happens with municipal design and waiting for a plan. But as an individual committee member and a community member, yeah, I do think that we will eventually need to build a new school for Turkey Hill. Like it's not a long-term solution, and I don't think a massive renovation is a long-term solution. And ideally, if it were up to me, I would like the school to go where TCP is now, so that we could maintain a school campus. But again, that's not up to me, that's a town decision.
Mr. Beardmore.
So relative to what Mr. Roy said, I completely agree. And I think that Mr. Jeffries can attest that he and I have either talked or I've texted him to harass him on this topic probably on a bi-weekly, if not monthly basis for the last year. And I think that the solution is not the solution that is landed at by the school committee or the municipal building committee alone. So I generally agree. And I also understand Mr. Gray's point. But I think that the luxury of that conclusion is a luxury that is afforded by more money than we have. And that's kind of the deal, right? If we had enough money to build a new school relative to all the other things that we need to do with the municipal building plan, we would do it, right? But I don't think we're going to have that money. And it's been more than a year since I've looked at the projections for debt capacity, but the numbers didn't work then. And in the intervening year, I think that the interest rates have tripled. So the debt capacity really isn't there to do phase 1, phase 2, and then go build a new school. I don't think it's there. Maybe we could go back and look at it, but the last I checked, the money wasn't there. And so part of the prioritization that we were asked to do or asked to participate in a year ago was the prioritization that said, look, you got a new primary school 20 years ago. You got a new middle high school 7 years ago. You've got a functioning elementary school that isn't perfect and is not ideal and has some risks associated with it. And you ought to manage those risks as we are dealing with longstanding issues that have been neglected, principally around town offices and municipal use. While also, by the way, dealing with a school department issue around municipal administrative office space, right? That we have that problem too. So that's kind of where this prioritization and where this thinking came from. I can't personally, and I've spent probably as much time as anybody on this call looking at these numbers. I can't personally imagine a scenario whereby we can do phase 1, phase 2, and then inside of the next 7 or 8 years, go and borrow sufficient money to replace Turkey Hill.
No.
And when we get to that point, I'm pretty sure that one of those critical systems is going to be a major problem. And we're going to be chasing our tails. So what we're talking about here, back to my original comment around, available funds and risk management is largely exactly that.
Okay, and just to recap, Peter, that's making an investment in the building now, so that way we get 10 more years out of it.
It's making an investment in the building at some point in the next few years, right? Like, and mitigating the risks.
All right. And I do believe, and I'm going to call in Carol here, I think that the last time we looked at these numbers, we had a debt. So several things have fallen off the debt, which is good. And our primary things that are sitting on the debt are the schools. And I want to say it's almost all of our debt right now, if not all of it, is related to schools. And, so we're trying to take advantage of the opportune time where we have one school that's 20 years old, one school that's 7 years old, one school that's clearly getting to the point of needing to get replaced in the next 10 years or so. We're trying to take advantage of this opportune time to resolve our municipal building needs for at least the next 100 years. Because when municipal buildings get built, as we all know, they don't need to be replaced on the frequency or schedule that schools need to get replaced on. Carol?
I just wanted to say that the school committee has committed themselves to working with the town, with this committee, we didn't want to go in and just say we need a new building. We understand what the debt capacity is. We want to play as part of the team. And that was the reason why I keep, and I continue to say, we're in the queue, we'll stay in the queue. As long as the queue is moving and you're moving, it looks like things are moving forward. But it also has been very important to me that everyone understand that that building is skating on thin ice. That if one of those major systems go, then we have to look for help. Because if the kids can't be in that building, they've got to be somewhere. So we are doing what we can to shore up the building. And when you spoke to us, Mr. Jeffrey spoke to us last fall and said, let's put the money in that building, and so that we don't have another primary school on our hands. I completely agree. The last thing I want to do is spend 15 years of town meetings arguing about a school building that needs to be taken down. So I agree with the sentiment that Mr. Jeffries has expressed and Mr. Roy has expressed, that we need to all work, and Mr. Gray, we all need to work together to get this figured out. And that's what we're trying to do. And we were very glad to be invited here tonight. And I'm sorry if our opinion had not reached everybody. Mr. Blatt, I'm sorry that you weren't aware of the situation at Turkey Hill, but it is what it is, and we are keeping it going, and we intend to.
Before I call on David and Christina, who are next, I just want to pause because I see some other members of the community who are with us. I'm not sure if they're tied into the school committee or not, but we do allow the public to participate in discussion. I did see Marlene send a text message, so I just want to pause for a minute. If Lynn Marabello or Marlene or Sean or Stephanie would like to offer any questions or comments. Okay, Mr. Blatt.
Actually, I'm going to let Christina speak first, and then I'll go from there.
All right.
Are you
If Dave,
sure?
if Dave, you are the vice chair, I need to step away for just a moment. So if you can
Sure.
just
Go for it, my friend.
Thank you.
Dave, are you sure you don't want to go first? I like following up after you.
No, that's okay, Christina. I'll let you at this time. I don't know if my comments that will be taken. Anyway, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, like, I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and you know, you're saying one thing and then saying another thing after, and it's like Peter's kind of saying, you know, this, and Kelly kind of said, the school's floating on thin ice, that it's not going to last. There's no longevity to it. We're not going to make it to phase 3, but you're waiting in line. So it's kind of two different things. It's kind of like, well, we're saying we're playing nice, but we're really not playing nice, because all we need is one thing to go off, and that's it. We're going to come down for the new school, which you might not mean that, but that's kind of the way it's being, I guess I'm taking it. So I think we've all sat here, and Peter, you were part of this discussion where we've all said the Turkey Hill would make a great town hall. And, you know, in my head, I always go back to that, like, well, is there a way that this would work out? But then we're still stuck with all these buildings. So it's like, okay, say you guys do vacate that building and it gets turned over to the town. Is this going to keep happening? And in 20 years, 30 years, this is going to be the same discussion of, hey, we have this town hall in the Ritter, it's falling apart. Hey, we have the town hall that it's like sentimental, so people don't want to get rid of. And now we have the new school at TCP, which is all well and good, but we have the old primary and we have the old middle high school that, you know, it's how do we stop the cycle of being stuck with all these old buildings? Like, what's your plan if you move out of that school to happen? Does it get turned over to the town and the town's going to sit on it and let it rot for 30 years? Is there, I guess, is there a way to make everyone in this meeting happy? Like, you're saying, okay, well, we're stuck in the school for another 10 years because we're doing all these projects, but why can't, there has to be a better way to go about this, because I feel like it's just a circle that, you know, in the end of the day, the only people that get stuck with it is the town with our raised taxes trying to keep buildings that are condemned and should have been knocked down years ago. You can go, Peter. I'm sorry.
As the question, Carol, I'd like to let you give you, Carol, it looks like you're looking to speak, so I'd like to let you have your opinion on that. comments.
Well, I just wanted to say that, you know, we have no intention of that building ending up like the primary school. And if we were to build a new building, which is up to the town, not up to us, if we were to build a new building, then we would have a plan for what happens to that building. If it's turned back over to the town, then I hope that with the town, we work together on what would happen to the building. And my vote would be, if there is no use for that building, we're not going to let it sit and rot. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to anybody at this point in time, you know. And if one of those systems go, that doesn't mean we build a new building. That means we have to figure out how to fix it. It's, you know, if we're going to keep that building in town, we have to fix those systems. But if the HVAC system is gone, then we've got to find a place for the kids to go while an HVAC system can be put together. And that's what we meant.
Okay,
Sorry
so,
to interrupt.
all
Can I
right,
just-
so, no, go ahead, Christina, sorry. Go ahead.
Say that HVAC goes tomorrow. What do you do? Like, is there any plan that you guys have started to think about? Because that's,
Yeah, we have started to think about that as part of our capital plan. We have down the road, not next year, but we have mini splits proposed for that building so that they can be used as backup heat if the heat goes out. Right now, the heat does not circulate around that building completely and well. So we have that. That's really all we've got. We don't have any other plan to replace the HVAC system. We need millions of dollars to do that we don't have. So that is a possibility of something we could do if that were to go. We try to come up with ideas, but, you know, ideas that you can't fund, you know, don't get
Okay,
you.
so can I say something on that? And this is really infuriating. So I've been part of the Green Committee since day one. And for years, I've been screaming at every board in town that why don't you talk to us? So you guys are sitting here and telling us you're gonna put mini splits in. First of all, if you do it for just heat, nobody's helping you. If you
Right,
talk
right.
to us, if you talk to us and you actually talk to us, which I've been asking every one of your facilitators, whatever it is, the building facility, whatever they guy
Facility
to do,
managers.
Facility.
right? Nobody shows up to our meetings. Nobody. Since John Londa left, and I have to say this, since John Londa left, you guys got 80% of the money that this town got for Green Committee, free money, was because of John and what he did. You guys haven't spoken to us once. I've seen in your plans like hundreds of thousands of dollars for mini splits. Talk to us. Why do you have a problem not talking to the people in your town that can help you? I even went through this when the building started, the middle high school. We had to help you guys get the National Grid Unitil guys involved, and it was too late to get some free funding involved. But nobody was talking to us ahead of time. You guys need to talk to the resources that are in this town, not just capital planning, and actually use the resources. There is free money available for you. Understand if you can do it right. There's free money for everything. We're sitting here saying $14 million to maintain the building. Give me $14 million and I'll make it a beautiful town hall and fix that building and then have it later on used for everything else. It's so frustrating right now. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm getting emotional because all I see is this town pissing money down the drain, pissing it away for no reason at all, and pissing my time away, which is more valuable than the money in all this stuff. And that's the problem I have. You guys are saying to me, you don't see this being a school. You're now also saying that if you take money from the state, you're stuck in that school for 15 years, because by the time you apply for the money, you do the repairs, you do all that. So you're going to be stuck in that school for 15 years. Okay, nobody says 10, 15 years, 2040 before you're able to do anything. Are you ready to do that? That's the biggest question I have. Are you ready to do that? Because that's a beautiful building for other purposes. And there's people in this that are sitting around here, you know, the community kitchen folks, the this folks, the that folks, who are dying for room in that building, who need the room badly. And we just need you guys to decide something on this thing. Sorry, you know, it's just
understand the
ridiculous.
frustration.
Right now, to me, it's ridiculous. I'm sitting here and, you know, we talked about phase 1, phase 2, $15 million. That's telling me that in 15 years, we have no money for you. You will not be able to build a school. Try having that school in 25 years. You're going to be stuck with that school for 25 years. You're going to have to maintain it. The second thing is, why do we keep giving these schools back to the town? I'm going to say to the school committee, you pay for the maintenance. You left the building empty. You pay for it to sit there, and you pay to maintain it, or you pay to do something with it. Why should the town have to do it? Sorry, I'm going to go, Mr. Chair, you better get me off the stage and get somebody else. I'm sorry. This is to me is ridiculous right now.
And for anyone paying attention, just to get some clarity, although we're all the same town, that in common conversation amongst us, usually we refer to the schools as a separate part of the budget than the remaining part of the budget, which is all the other town functions. And so the school committee has, or the school department and the school committee has their own budget. That's roughly 52% of the budget, without including all the retirement costs. But that is what we're saying is where does the maintenance come from? Does the maintenance, to Dave Blatt's point, does the maintenance cost come out of the school budget, or do they come out of the town budget? And when buildings get turned over to the town, they switch from being on the school budget to being on the town budget. And so that is what that is referring to. And next was Tony, Mr. Scullin-Brini, Mr. Roy, Mr. Beardmore, and then I'm sorry, Mr. Scullin-Brini, before you go, I want to give Carol and Peter on the school committee the chance to respond to Mr. Blatt's comments.
Thank you. Throughout my time as chair of the school committee, I've never been contacted by Green Communities. I'm happy to go to Green Communities and talk about this. We have contacted Mr. Passios, but if that is not the proper contact, then I'm happy to do what needs to be done.
Like I say, that we have made ourselves known. Every new facility manager you've had, I've contacted, and that's who I'm supposed to contact, is the facilities manager. And I've contacted them, asked them to our meetings, and they never even respond to an email. That's the disgusting thing I have here, is that nobody responds to an email. John Londa did an amazing job. You guys should have begged him, doubled his salary to stay, because he got you more money free per year than his salary ever cost you. It is disgusting what I'm seeing now.
I'm sorry that has occurred, and I will speak. We have a new facilities manager. I'll make sure that it is on his schedule to do that.
Great. We are meeting tomorrow at the library at 7 o'clock. Somebody should show up if you want to talk about these kind of things, because we're starting to talk about the next grant in the spring. You know, we've only gotten $500,000 free for this town over time, and we would have gotten more if the town actually participated.
All right, so Mr. Blatt, I think that's the end of the plugging of Green Communities Task Force. I think we get the picture of what you're talking about. And so Mr. Beardmore. And I see a comment in the chat room, seeing that nobody really works together at all in this town. I would say that that's not accurate. You know, that's why we're having this meeting today. That, you know, sometimes things happen in a vacuum. And when we can't come into agreement on matters, you know, we tend to vote with the most pressing needs. And the most pressing needs in our community have often been schools, especially over the last several years. But I think that the town does communicate often, work together. But you know, we do have you know, revolving list of people. We have a lot of vacancies on both the staff side and the municipal or town committee side. And so it tends to be the same core group of people that are volunteering in many different boards, and things do get lost. But I want to communicate to Mr. Beardmore and then go back to Tony and then Mr. Roy.
Thank you. I'll be brief, but this needs to be said. Mr. Blatt said he was getting emotional, and I can tell you, I'm feeling pretty emotional right now too. There's nobody sitting in any office on this call right now that was in the same office at the time that any of the decisions that Mr. Blatt referred to and used the pronoun you, which I assume is in the plural, directed at me during the applicable time. Not a single person. The only person in any of the relevant boards that was in their office at any of those given times is Mr. Alonso. We're here, and by the way, Mr. Allison, speak up and stop pointing at me through the window, okay? If you have something to say, please say it. I'm volunteering my time here just like everybody else. I put in probably 15, 20 hours a week working on this stuff. I've asked for this joint meeting. I think we've, been quite transparent and forthright on the issues. I think that the reality is that we have to get to this place together. And, to whatever extent I can help to do that, I'm more than happy to do my best to help to get there. But with all due respect, I don't appreciate being lectured to, because I can't tell you how many conversations I've had on this topic over the course of the last year, present company included, to the two members that I just addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beardmore. Mr. Scullin-Brini.
Well, I think it's pretty clear from the conversations we've had in the last hour and 20 minutes that we who have been closest to this issue are having a difficult time tracking a path forward. So imagine what these conversations would be like if you were at a town meeting where you were asking for funding to do something. So it's controversial. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. The one thing that I keep going back to whenever I've worked on a project is to say, what's my mission? What am I doing here? What am I trying to accomplish? And this is the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. And I think that one of the things that we could do as a committee, and this kind of supports what Carol's been saying, is let's get the town's needs addressed and resolved. That's like the phase 1, phase 2. And there are pieces of the school that are in those pieces. And what we need to concentrate on is how do we move forward in 1 and 2 and get those 2 projects completed and satisfy the town. The other thing that is the elephant in the room is that there's a huge amount of concern about the condition of Turkey Hill School. And you cannot do maintenance by replacement, and unfortunately, I think that there has been some of that has gone on. You keep waiting. Well, I don't want to fix that because we're going to get something new. I don't want to fix that system because we're going to get something new. And you can't manage a facility. You can't manage facilities like the town has with that type of an approach. I remember the comment that was made at the November town meeting last fall when the guy says, "Hey, can we fix Margie's broken window in the Ritter building?" While we were talking about replacing all the windows in the Ritter building, we should have fixed the Ritter building window when it broke, not wait for a project to replace all of the windows. And I think that's the same thing that's going on with Turkey Hill School. Now, I spent a career fixing up old buildings, transforming them from one thing to another, Carol. And I know how successful that's going to be. But I am not going to say today, and nor should any of us say today, we should have a new school or we should repair the old one, because I think that requires a significant amount of detailed engineering time to make that type of decision. And I'm here to tell you that if we want a new school in this community, after we fix up, Town Hall and Ritter, because those are the administrative needs that we've been asked to address, we're gonna have to convince the voters and the taxpayers, and we are all those people on this call, that that's the wisest use of town money. So I can vouch for a fact that you can take old buildings and turn them into something marvelously different from what they were. But I'm not going to try and convince anybody on this call today, because you need facts and data to do that. Matt, Allison, one of the things that you said a long time ago was, if we had a master plan, these discussions would be in that master plan. Now, I am glad to see that we've begun the master planning process, and we ought to let some of that master planning process maybe help define what phase 3 would look like, Michael Ray. But I think that we really need to step back and make progress on 1 and 2. And if we have components of 1 and 2 that involve, Carol and her board, we need to say, what do you want us to do? Will this work? If it doesn't work, then we move on and figure out how to get new space for the town staff, and at the same time, fix up a building in Ritter that needs some additional repairs. So, I think that's where we need to step back to, is let's concentrate on 1 and 2. Let's get through that, and then let's figure out, what's going to happen. In the meantime, let's figure out how to keep Turkey Hill running, and how to, make the decision about redo or brand new.
Yep. And I see that we got another question in the chat. I will respond to it. So what we're saying is that when you take money from the state to rehabilitate or a new school, it locks you into that use, or you have to pay that money back. And I think that what the position that I'm kind of taking is, if it costs us I'm gonna throw a number out. If it costs us $18 million to do something, and ultimately it's gonna cost us $18 million to do it, but the state was willing to fork over half, then I think we need to consider, is the 10 years worth it? Or are we gonna add that 18 million to the cost of a new school? Because ultimately that 18 million still has to get spent. So it's just, do we take it now, kind of force ourselves to reuse a building, or do we add that on to the cost of whatever that future disposition is going to be? And part of the challenge historically has been that when we've built new schools, we haven't added that disposition cost. The cost of what it takes to bring that building to future use, we haven't added that into the cost model. And so it's landed us with kind of why we have a municipal building design committee, why there's been that history of the building reuse committee, which is, now that we have this property, how do we best convert it over to future use? I do want to wrap up this portion of the conversation soon. I think that we've expressed a lot of different viewpoints here tonight. I want to call, before I go to you, Mr. Beardmore, Mr. Roy had his hand up for a bit and I wasn't able to get to him. So I just want to go back over to Mr. Roy here. I'll turn back to you, Mr. Beardmore. I'll ask for any questions from the public, and then I will try to do a round out with Chairman Archambault.
My questions were very narrowly focused and do not seem appropriate based on the way the conversation has devolved. So I'm going to withdraw my time and yield the floor over to my colleague, Mr. Beardmore.
Peter.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer that to Mrs. Scolambrini's comments. I think the problem here is that I don't know that keeping Turkey Hill going is a trivial matter. And I think that, part of the homework here, or the takeaway, may be to kind of really expose that from a financial perspective in terms of exactly what we're looking at. Just to add a little bit of context, to replace any one of these major systems is very likely going to trip an ADA requirement. And we don't actually know what the ADA implications are. They're potentially quite extraordinary, and may require some substantial work, particularly when it comes to the bathrooms in the classroom wings. So that's really the crux of the matter, right? Is to say, yeah, let's do phase 1 and phase 2. Like I can conceptually agree with that. But the problem is without a financial plan that kind of outlines what phase 3 is, and the acknowledgement or the understanding that there's some risk associated with that, which is, really the biggest, probably, I hope, takeaway from today's meeting. That all has to be considered into the financial equation here. And ideally, if we can come up with some kind of agreement that, this is the path we're going, and here's the reserve or whatever it is that, can potentially get us through a critical failure, that would be okay too. I'm wide open to any suggestions or ideas there. But I'm not sure that I'd be open to, we'll just do phase 1 and phase 2 and worry about Turkey Hill later, which I know is not what you said, but the keeping Turkey Hill going, I'm not sure is as feasible or as easy as you may have conveyed.
Well, Peter, what you're saying is that maybe the priority of Turkey Hill is greater than finding a place for the town manager and the folks that are in Ritter. I mean, we're running this town right now. I mean, and I've said this a couple of times. We're running this town right now, with what we have in the way of admin facilities, but they're not very good. But the question is Turkey Hill a higher priority? That's really what you're saying, is that Turkey Hill may be a priority. I can tell you from having installed temporary boiler facilities for 3 million square feet at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I was surprised at what you can do on a temporary basis. We had to take down our primary boiler for Area B, and it was like, and we postponed that for years because everyone was so afraid that we couldn't do it because people would be in freezing buildings. All of our buildings were relied on the central heating plan. And then when we really looked at the issue, it was like, wow, we can go out and rent boilers and we can take that plant down in the middle of the winter time and still be successful. So I don't want to go into engineering details about how to keep Turkey Hill alive. But I think that, what you just said, Peter, is that the school board has to go back and it has to establish what the real needs are and when those needs, what's the timing on those needs. That's why I asked you the question, Carol. I didn't want to know whether you wanted to replace it or build a new one or fix the old one. But I wanted you to state, this is when we really need to have this work done. We as a planning committee for the admin piece, we've been saying that's a priority for the town. And, is it still? I mean, is the Turkey Hill, can you make a case that Turkey Hill needs to be phase 1, not phase 3? And the last thing I'll say is what we want might necessarily be what we can afford, so that means you might have to make some compromises.
Yep.
That's it, Michael.
All right, Mr. Allison.
Yeah, thank you. I have refrained from commenting because much as Mr. Blatt, I am very frustrated and somewhat angered by this process, having gone on for 12 years, and I've been involved with it for close to that. And first off, I want to apologize to Mr. Beardmore for I certainly was not pointing my finger at you when you mentioned the one and only elected official that's been involved in this process over this time. That's what I was pointing at. There's been one, well, a few of us, I suppose. Turkey Hill was not included in the TAP-A study. We don't have a building analysis of it. We don't have any existing conditions. We don't have any detailed studies that is already outdated, of course, by the way. So I'm kind of disgusted at the fact that we've turned and talked about Turkey Hill because this is the Municipal Building Design Committee, right? Turkey Hill is not a municipal building, okay? TCP technically is a municipal building, but its past use has been a school. So any further use, and I'm quite honestly sure that the current use of it is not along with the requirements of zoning for building use. I mean, it's not being used as a school anymore, so it really should have
Yes,
gone
it is.
right for site plan approval. Okay.
There's a school in there. My son goes there. There's preschools in there.
That's great. So there's so many things. There's a 55-acre campus right now. It's still a 55-acre campus with four buildings. Is that important to people? I think we've lost sight of the fact that we have a 55-acre school campus. That's important in my mind. I think that's a very important thing. The thing that turned me off the schools, I know that everybody needs an education and almost everybody has kids and everybody loves their kids. And I love kids myself. I think they are our future. They're very important, but they're not more important than everything else, which anyone here? So to get back to a point, anyone here notice that volunteer issues, and we're all volunteers. I don't think there's anybody here except for Mrs. Burnham who is paid in any capacity.
We also have the town manager here with us. Town of Lunenburg.
Very good. Well, you know what? What I've noticed is that a lot of the things that come up with in these volunteer groups and discussions are very, very, very valid points and topics that don't necessarily translate to, you know, what the desired translation is when they're expressed. There's no free money. So Mr. Blatt, as much as I agree with your sentiments and comments and discussion, there is no free money. Money came from some taxpayer. Okay, the government does not have a money tree. Maintenance is far cheaper than repair, upgrade, brand new. You know, and there was a point made about the schools getting buildings, using them, and then not maintaining them and passing them off back to the municipal side of it. So we've got the old primary, which has been torn down. We've got the new primary, which is the TC, well, we've got the TC Passios, and we've got the new primary. The new primary was built in a swamp, and it wasn't very well forethoughted. I mean, and now we've got this new $72 million school that has already had, I'm not quite sure, and I'm not even going to mention it, but has had considerable amount of work done on it since it was new. And I just, MSBA, they give us half of whatever the expense is, but we have to play by their rules. So my question for Mr. Roy, and it's rhetorical, I'm not looking for an answer, but before that, was there a consideration of building a school on our own dime before MSBA was involved? And if so, what was the expected cost of that building? And then after MSBA come in with, oh, we'll give you twice as much. Did that change? I want to emphasize the maintenance. Right now, the Ritter building, which is what we're looking at being our new town hall, it's had trees growing out of the gutters for years. They're still there. There's a tree growing out of the gutter. The maintenance sucks. I'm getting a little emotional too, so I think I can stop there. But I just wanted to make it clear that I don't disagree with Mr. Blatt's emotions. And Mr. Beardmore, I'm probably one of your bigger fans in town, so I certainly didn't want you to think that I was angry at you.
I appreciate it, Matt. And for everybody's benefit, Matt and I have known each other since kindergarten, probably. So.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. I will call on Ms. Lockwood in a moment. So, I want to comment first. It's good to have these kinds of conversation. Discourse is important to the democratic process. That, we have to come into this with a variety of different viewpoints because we represent all the people, and the people have a variety of different viewpoints. And the challenge for all elected leaders, myself included, is how do we get consensus on the path ahead? What we have been successful in doing as a town is building new schools. What we have been unsuccessful at is rehabilitating town property and specifically town facilities. You know, when we look at working conditions, I just want to note this, you know, right now on the town side, we are down 316 hours a week. Okay, a week. This includes the finance director, the assistant finance director, our principal assessor, our land use director. These are critical roles that we, let me keep going, conservation agent. These are critical roles that the town needs to be able to perform its basic functions. And if you are coming into, you know, if you go into the town of Air has new municipal buildings, and the ones that are old, their old town hall from 1884, I think it is, has been rehabilitated. When you go into the town of Shirley, same deal. You go into the town of Townsend. When we look at the communities that someone would want to work in, the working conditions that we provide in the town of Lunenburg are simply unacceptable. I think that when we talk to all of our staff, from the superintendent's office, who can't keep air conditioning running with leaks in the building, TC Passios has 40 holes in that roof. That, according to our facility director, 40 active leaks in TC Passios today. We have children in the building. We have the superintendent's office in the building. We have PAC in the building. If we want to get a handle on being able to provide an attractive work for people environment for people to work in, you know, we have to look at our buildings, and this is pretty basic. You know, how many of us would want to go to work where we have, you know, snow coming in the windows when it snows, rain coming in the windows when it rains, you know, every time there's precipitation, you got to go put the 40 buckets out. You know, these are just conditions that are just not acceptable. And so we're trying to figure out the most cost-effective way to get to the end state we want to get to. And so what I want to look for tonight is if there's agreement on part of the, and I want to go to Anna here in a moment, but I am going to ask if we have agreement on the current approach being phase 1 and phase 2, and to continue this conversation, believing that phase 3 is tied into both phase 1 and phase 2, but continuing the conversation on the overlap between Turkey Hill and TC Passios. Because in my mind, if TC Passios gets an investment that allows it to upgrade the windows, makes critical building system repairs, and is viable for 10 years, I would like us to do the bare bones minimum at TC Passios with the plan of taking over Turkey Hill and moving all the functions that we currently do at TC Passios into Turkey Hill, and then also providing a home for the Boys and Girls Club who do so desperately need it. So I will be seeing if we have consensus on that roadmap here in a moment while we think about it. And I'll turn to Ms. Anna Lockwood. Anna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you all for getting on the same meeting and having this very lively discussion. You know, I appreciate everyone's points and where everyone stands. The only thing that I have to say is we need to get going. I think there is a general consensus, and I think that's what the chair just asked everyone to think about it, that we need to get an idea of how much Turkey Hill is going to cost. And the longer we wait, the longer that the school will need to be a school. So when we finish the high school, which Nathan served as part of the building committee, and I think they're with Mr. Roy, Colleen Shapiro, they were the first ones on that. You know, we were already talking about the Turkey Hill needing an upgrade. That was what, 5-7 years ago, and we still have not done anything to move that project forward. And that's where I think we're missing. We need, and I think this is a little bit on the school committee. I think the school committee needs to make it part of their priority to get a good handle on what is Turkey Hill needs, not just have these numbers as this is going to cost 7 million, this is going to cost something else. Like Mr. Scalambrini said, we need real data to understand what we have. And I think it's upon the school committee to put in a capital request for a engineering study of Turkey Hill, because then, only then, we can make a decision about Turkey Hill or TC Passios. But that's really upon the school committee. And that has been the conversation since we inaugurated the new high school on the summer of 2016 when my kids graduated. So the only thing that I ask, I think, phase 1 and phase 2 makes sense, but we need to get the ball rolling on Turkey Hill so that not 5-7 years down the road, we're then make a decision. We need to make that decision sooner rather than later. So we are not using Turkey Hill as a school until 2050, because that's what it's going to be if we wait another 8 years to then start looking at Turkey Hill. And now these projects, phase 1 and 2, will take multiple years. I would say anywhere from 4 to 6. So, so now we're talking about using Turkey Hill as a school for 20 years, because the process of engineering and all is going to take another 5 years. So yeah, we're talking about using Turkey Hill for 20 years from that date on. So let's get the ball rolling with Turkey Hill. Please do a capital request for engineering studies so we can have the data. As the engineer in the room said, we need data to decide what to do with Turkey Hill. And right now, all these numbers that everyone keeps throwing at me, which, I'm a citizen, I don't hold value to them because we haven't looked at alternatives, nothing. So we need to get that going. So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I want to just give the floor to any final comments from the public, whether that's, again, the members of the public who are with us, Dr. Burnham or Madam Town Manager. If either of you would like to make any comments, please let me know.
Mr. Jeffries,
Yes, Dr. Burnham.
I would just like to offer to Mrs. Lockwood that we actually did include some engineering study to make an assessment of the Turkey Hill Elementary included in our capital plan that was submitted. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so what I want to look for here is some consensus. I know we've had some pretty good conversation tonight. I know this is an hour and 45 minutes of everyone's time. In these conversations as chair, I try to allow as much to come out as possible, because again, I do believe that discourse is important to the process. But I want to see if we're all in agreement, and then I will make a motion for us to jointly vote on. But I want to see if we're all in agreement with the current kind of outline that we have, which is for the Municipal Building Design Committee to proceed with advancing phase 1 and phase 2, and to continue the development of phase 3 that includes the disposition of Turkey Hill while identifying the disposition of TC Passios. So I'm looking to the school committee first to see if you're generally in agreement with this approach.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. I would ask the school committee if they would indicate if they are in general in agreement with this approach, then that we go to phase 1 and phase 2, and then phase 3 be involved with how does Turkey Hill fall in with the phase 3 of this plan. I would state, though, before I ask my colleagues, that is what we've said all along, is that we wanted these buildings to be taken care of. And that's what I say. So Laura, thoughts from you?
I've ever since I heard the phase 1 plan for the Ritter building, I have been in wild favor of it. I think it's a great plan, and I am very thankful to the building design committee for coming up with the plan, because I think it's a great plan. As far as the Ritter and the annex, I'm not sure what you guys are calling it, the addition for town hall.
New town hall.
New town hall. I am wholeheartedly in favor of that as a school committee member and as a citizen. I'm wildly in favor of that. As far as phase 2, glad we're saving town hall and keeping it as a meeting house, because meeting space is difficult. I've been on other committees and it's difficult to find meeting space. So keeping it as a meeting house is smart and a good plan. I'm not. I almost want, as far as phase 2, I almost want to run concurrent with figuring out what to do with Turkey Hill. I would worry that if we wait and then there won't be money, if we wait to do something about Turkey Hill and then the clock for the 10 years, say we decide to put the MSBA money into Turkey Hill after phase 2 is completed, then that sets the clock for 10 years. And now we are in Turkey Hill for 15 or through 2040, 2045, 2050. But generally, yes, I'm in favor of phase 1 and phase 2.
And to clarify, I think my thought right now is that we don't have the conversation about phase 3 in 3 or 4 years from now, but we continue to have this conversation as we go towards Springtown meeting.
Okay, and I like that the phases are flexible. So I think in general, yes, I appreciate all the work on these plans. These are good plans, and I know these took years to come up with. So, yes.
Mr. Whitmore?
So I think I would echo pretty much everything Ms. Brzezowski just said. I generally, so the rub between me and her sentiment is that I think, as you all know, if I were king for a day, I would have done phase 1 and phase 2 differently. I've expressed that, but it is what it is. That's where the direction went. I think it's a reasonable compromise and it has to be done. I think that where I'm not quite sure what the question is this a commitment for a vote on the first Saturday of May? Or is this an agreement to continue to work on kind of refining what phase 3 is and the financial plan associated with that relative to phases 1 and phase 2? And I think what you just described was the latter, Mr. Jeffries, but I think that that's a really important thing for me, because right now I just don't understand the finances anymore in full transparency, as I said at the beginning. And I'm very worried that we're going to do something that's going to put us in a financial corner that we're not going to have flexibility in the out years. And I, with all due respect, I'm a member of the capital planning committee. I just don't have a lot of confidence in that process as a standalone. Maintenance was discussed a lot tonight. There's a lot that's been on that capital plan request list that hasn't been, dealt with. And part of the reason why maintenance doesn't happen is because of that track, and then other priorities relative to education and other town needs, that stuff just doesn't get done. And I think what I came looking for tonight was some kind of agreement or consensus, like, yeah, we can get our arms around the whole thing so that we'll have a holistic story to tell come May. Directionally, I'm in agreement, but there's a lot more to the story that I need to understand.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and on our side, I would just want to make sure I already know we're working on this. So I don't know if I need to find the agreement here tonight, but I know that we're all pretty committed to phase 1 and phase 2 and working on phase 3. It's just there's going to be some clear overlap as we figure out disposition of TC Passios, which is our current lens. I think we need to clearly work together on the overlap with Turkey Hill project. And, if there's a conversation for me, that from what I've heard tonight, if there's a question for me about funding phase 1, funding phase 2, and then funding anything for TC Passios, I'm already in the mindset today that all money that we were thinking of for TC Passios should be directed towards Turkey Hill. If the school seems pretty resolute that the building that you need a new school, not a long-term, annex or addition to the school. Then I think that kind of, kills two birds with one stone. I just want to confirm before you guys dismiss yourselves from Mr. Gray, Mr. Roy, Mr. Allison, Mr. Black, if we're all in agreement to that general concept. Yes,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I think so. I'd just like to say that, again, I really appreciate this the school committee coming. And I understand it was emotional and heated, and I love it that way. So I'm really glad to get everybody's comments. I think that my comments regarding phase 1 and phase 2 are that I remain committed to those. And I think that in light of tonight's conversation, I'm in full agreement that we need to advance phase 3 financial, phase 3. We need phase 3 needs to come in picture, and we need to do our due diligence on the finances relative to that. But phase 1 and phase 2 is work on 2 historically significant buildings that nobody in town has any appetite for doing anything other than renovating. Okay, we're not going to rip down Ritter, and we're not going to demolish the town hall. Okay, and if that's the case, both of those buildings need to be renovated. And phase 1 and phase 2, we haven't really said it in this light tonight. Phase 1 and phase 2 will do the plan would be to do historically appropriate and a good job at historically appropriate renovations to those buildings, so that we breathe life back into those buildings, recognize them for what they are, significant town historical resources. We bring them back to life, and we bring them back to functional life, so that we're using them for things that are in need of the town. So I remain completely on board with phase 1 and phase 2. But I really appreciate all the discussion from all parties relative to the path beyond that. And I hope that as I said in my earlier comments, I hope that we can, excuse me, I hope that we can get together on this, or stay together on this, and proceed together across the budgetary divide, if you will, being the school and the town share things. Because in my view, I get that it comes out of different buckets, and that's an appropriate distinction. But at the end of the day, I think that town meeting is going to appreciate that we're on the same page with this. And I think that we need to get there. So thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
I am in support of phase 1 and phase 2. We do have $225,000 set up for architectural engineering costs, because to know what it's going to actually cost to do the work that we are thinking of. I think that's important. That'll tell us, where we stand financially, so that we can do other things. I think the discussion about, I think Carolyn mentioned it, and I think Anna had mentioned it, about getting Turkey Hill numbers really nailed down for renovation, building, whatever it is. I think that's important for us to know too, because again, as Peter has mentioned, and I know for sure, that we only have a limited amount of money to be able to borrow, and that actually is shrinking every day because of rates going up. But we need to know how all this fits together, and it's and plus what is going to happen with other buildings in the next 10 or 15 years that we already have, that are already okay now, but might need it. So we're going to need to think about all those things. And so I think phase 1 and phase 2, I am full support of it. I think it needs to be done. I think phase 3, whether it's Turkey Hill or TCP both being discussed, that needs to happen ASAP, so that we can have more data earlier, so that we can make the proper decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Christina? Ms. Masitis?
Oh, you got it. I guess my one question is with the school committee here, I forget if it's phase 1 or phase 2 with the Ritter, if the school is redone, does that change plans for PAC at all, or the administration, or that would still be in new town hall? I just wanted a clear answer on that.
Yeah, so PAC would be in the TC Passios. They would in any kind of plan where we'd be waiting 10 years to go into Turkey Hill, they're going to be the largest Soar Point.
I meant ACE. Like, would
okay.
ACE be part of the new school? Because that's technically part of the school. So would they want that still in town hall, or would that change that plan at all? Because I know in consideration for space, that was considered.
Through the chair, can I answer that?
Of course.
ACE needs to stay with the administrator that administers that program, and that program is for older students, so it would not be suited for an elementary school to have those populations at the same site. So it would stay at Ritter.
Mr. Blatt?
Okay, so I'm okay with phase one, phase two, feel we need to proceed forward. That was the charter of the committee, the original charter of the committee was to figure out how you get town offices together. Period, exclamation point. I do agree also with the comments that we're hearing regarding finding out, getting an engineer to tell us what's going on with Turkey Hill. What repairs they feel are necessary now, what's necessary what can be waited on, and things of that. I do not feel like there is a phase three right now. Phase three is something that we're basically just talked about, and it's kicked down the road. If Turkey Hills is going to get funding from the state, phase three just got kicked down the road 15 years on this thing, because it didn't sound like to me that there's any appetite here, because we wanted to keep a campus that that if you would either have to tear down Turkey Hill and build on that same site with all temporary classrooms, or you need TC Passios. So I can't see that you can do a community kitchen. I can't see you can do any of those things to Passios while you might need that building. I also do have a little trouble there with the ACE program being in town hall. I believe that the ACE program should not be in town hall. This is students, not town administrators, and that the ACE program, if it wants to be anywhere, would need to be ACE program in Ritter at all. This is students. It is not anything to do with town offices. So that, if anywhere, would have to go towards the old town hall, and the administration person for that program could be in town hall as well. But it makes no sense that we should be building office space or building space for students in town hall, in the Ritter building.
Okay. Mr. Scullin-Brini. Mr. Scullin-Brini, just so everyone's aware, is our representative from the APDC. We try to run meetings here that allow everyone to participate at any time. And so we have kind of taken on Tony as our 8th member.
And I genuinely appreciate it. But I was going to say to Carol, when she was polling the school board, if she wanted me to speak for my son. Because fathers can do stuff like that, right? But I'm so proud of he has his own opinion and he supports your school board committee. It's a father's pride that I say that with, Carol. Michael, I think that from an APDC perspective, Greg Roy's comments are music to my ears. Is that we have 2 great buildings, one of which is about 170 years old and has stood the test of time. And I know there's always concern about from people about spending money on old buildings, but I see old buildings with good bones and bad bones, and both of these buildings have great bones. What I don't know, and I think this is where we're headed with regards to phase 3 or evaluating what's needed at Turkey Hill, is that we need to see if Turkey Hill has good bones. And I don't know that. And I think that, Dr. Burnham has mentioned that there's money in the budget or money being requested, to get an engineer study. Got to have the facts, got to have the data to say whether it's good bones or bad bones. That's all that I'll say. Thank you for giving me a chance to continue to participate, Michael. Right.
Oh, of course, Tony. Well, I'm not going to look for a formal vote tonight. I think we have the informal consensus that we're going to keep working together. It sounds like there's some work to be done on both of our sides before we meet again. Oh, Mr. Allison.
Thank you.
I thought I hit you first. I apologize, man.
That's all right. No, I I agree with most of everything that's been said about phase one and phase two, and also I think that phase one and phase two would complete the charter of this committee, of this group. I think that once phase one and phase two is agreed upon in finance, that maybe phase three should be looked at by a different group that's not Municipal Building Design Committee, because if you want to include Turkey Hill, technically, it's not a municipal building. So there's that. And then also, I think that Greg's assertion that it would be a 4 or 5 year for phase one and two, I think might be a little bit shy of, I appreciate Greg's professional input, and technically, yes, if it was done by somebody with money that only did what they wanted to do, then yeah, in probably 3 or 4 years, they'd get it done. But no, that's not Lunenburg. So I'd be surprised if phase one and phase two got completed within 6 years. But I will also backtrack a little bit to the master plan, since I'm the planning board representative. The master plan is typically the kind of thing that drives stuff like this, but since our master plan is severely outdated and really crappy and didn't really address a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, we can look forward to in the next 18 to 24 months, all participating in that process and having our voices heard and having our input added to it. But again, I think that phase one and phase two, I'm pretty confident that they'll suffice with, however it goes. But again, I think they're gonna satisfy this committee's charge. And phase three, again, I'll say, I don't think is within this committee's charge to begin with, quite honestly, to include Turkey. And then I'll also repeat the fact that we don't have a TAPE study. I think that was the one that did the 5 buildings existing conditions. Was it TAPE or was that Vertex? Whichever one it was, we don't have that for Turkey Hill. So we don't have an apple there, or an orange. If we want to go apples and apples, or oranges and oranges, or as Lunenburg often does, apples and oranges, we don't have an apple or an orange for Turkey Hill. So that being said, I don't know. I mean, a vote would have been a clean thing, but it doesn't sound like we're going there. But that is my input, I guess. Thank you.
Well, we will meet again. So, and I assure you that next time we will put a tighter time limit on it. But we will meet again, and we will have
I disagree with that as well. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know you do. I know you disagree with time limits, but I try to target 90 minutes for these meetings. So, all right, let me pause here and give the school committee the opportunity. Any final words from Chairman Archambault, or if you want to move to close your meeting. You're still, you might want to unmute that one. I know.
Well, I only did that once tonight. That wasn't bad for me. I want to thank you for inviting us here. I know it's a tough conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and I appreciate it. And Mr. Beardmore had to drop the call, so he said to send his thanks for the meeting. And I think it is time for us to adjourn. Laura, would you like to make a motion for the school committee to adjourn?
I motion that the school committee adjourns.
And we will vote that even though we're missing our quorum. So we will adjourn our meeting, and I thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, so turning back to our agenda here tonight, I think that everything else we have can wait 2 more weeks. So with time, it is, I know that we're probably bumping up against other commitments that members have. So if there is, Mr. Allison and I are continuing to work on the computer plan, so that way that can get ordered. He identified a good system to order. And then and that is just a matter of getting it ordered. And so what we need to discuss at our next meeting is just continue to discuss the ARPA funding commitment, RFP language, to have some time to review that. And I need to send that in advance anyway. And then our community update article for the special town meeting warrant. So I am okay proceeding tonight with kind of moving towards closure and skipping over those items for tonight. And then going into our future meeting schedule, which is the first and third Monday of every month, especially now that we have re-engaged this process. So our next meeting then puts us on for the 6th of November. So that would be November the 6th, Monday the 6th. Any additional, I had public comments in the agenda, but I never called for them. So I'll call for some public comments, or before we get to that point. Anyone have any disagreement? Is there any points of discussion here that you guys want to continue to have tonight? Or are we okay after that lively conversation wrapping up and re-engaging at our next meeting? Matt says he's okay in re-engaging later. Okay, Christina? All right, good. All right. So we're going to call for public comments then. Do you have any public comments this evening from the public or members of the board? Okay. Municipal Building Design Committee meets first and third Monday at 6 p.m. via Zoom. So please continue to check us out. And again, we do encourage participation throughout the entire process. So you can always text a question or just jump in and speak after raising your hand. We do try to make this as community oriented as possible. So with that, I move to, the time is 8:09 and I move to adjourn.
Second, has to be roll call.
Yep, and we're going to do a roll call vote, including Tony. Mr. Allison.
Aye.
Mr. Gray.
Aye.
Mr. Blatt.
Aye.
Mr. Roy. Oh, you're on mute, but I know you're voting yes. Okay. Christina, excuse me, Ms. Masitis.
Aye.
Mr. Scullenbrini.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Roy's on mute. We're motioning to adjourn. Mr. Roy. He says aye, and an aye for myself. All right. Thank you all, and we'll see each other again soon.
Thanks. Take care, guys.